Through our study of the Bible, we've discovered that every departure from righteousness leads to moral decay and disintegration of human society. In the midst of the chaos and anarchy that surrounds our world, we're grateful to know that you have promised to preserve your people, the righteous ones. Be with us throughout the study. Help us not to chase after trivial pursuits and empty earthly glory, but seek above all else your righteousness and your kingdom. Reveal to us your will and empower us to do it through Jesus Christ our Lord, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I want to thank you, everyone who's present. Greatly appreciate your interest in the book of Revelation. Today, we'll take up the study of Revelation chapter 8. So we'll start with verse 1. When he, that's Jesus, when Jesus opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. So you remember when we studied Revelation chapter 6, we went through the sixth seal, and I told you at that time that the seventh seal is in chapter 8, verse 1. So in between chapter 6 and chapter 8 is chapter 7 that refers to the 144,000 and the great multitude who have come out of the great tribulation. So this one, when it says there was silence in heaven, meaning there was a pause. It's like a breathing space, okay? A pause between the seven seals and the seven trumpets. I want to tell you something. The first person who wrote a commentary on the book of Revelation is somebody called Victorinos. He was a Greek Christian who lived in the early 3rd century. Unfortunately, we don't have his book. His book is lost. The only thing we have left from his book is the introduction, his introductory remarks. But his interpretation of the book of Revelation, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, is lost, unfortunately. But this fellow was the first to write a commentary on the book of Revelation, and he lived in the early 3rd century. So he could have been a disciple of one of the apostles. That's a distinct possibility. Now, he tells us that there are 3 major series of judgments in the book of Revelation. The first is the 7 seals. We discovered that they are really judgments, a series of judgments. The 7 trumpets are also a series of judgments. And the 7 bowls. We haven't, today you will start studying the first 4 trumpets. And then when we finish the study of the trumpets and the bowls, then we'll compare them with the 7 seals. And we'll see that they are repetitive and sequential. This is what Victorinos tells us, that the prophecies are the prophecies that involve a series of judgments are sequential. In other words, they come one after the other. They follow an order, and they're repetitive. In other words, some are repeated, like some of the 7 seals are repeated in the trumpets, and some of the trumpets and the seals are repeated in the 7 bowls. So let's keep that in mind. All right, now we go to verse 2, Revelation 8:2. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. In ancient times, the trumpet was used as an alarm for war. The trumpet sound rallied the troops, made them ready for war. Cities were surrounded by ramparts or high walls, and they had guards on those walls all the time. If they noticed invaders approaching, they sounded the alarm. They blew their trumpets. And the trumpets were also used when the children of Israel had a religious convocation, when they had a religious worship that involved the entire assembly. The priests blew their trumpets like today churches ring their bells, church bells. But in ancient Israel, the priests blew their trumpets, telling the people to attend a convocation, a religious assembly. So they were used, trumpets were used in times of war and also during worship. Okay. Now there are seven angels, reference to seven angels. It like each angel had a trumpet, and each angel blew a trumpet, and after each trumpet was sounded, a series of calamities took place. Now, when we study Jewish religious books, we find that the Jews of today believe that there are seven archangels. And these are mentioned in a book which is not included in the Old Testament. It's not a canonical book, but it's a Jewish religious book that goes back to 200 years before Christ. First Enoch chapter 20. And here you have on the screen the names of the seven archangels: Uriel, Raphael, Raguel, Michael, Saraquel, Gabriel, and Ramiel. So we know number 4, Michael, and we know number 6, Gabriel. These are mentioned in the New Testament, these two archangels. The rest are not mentioned. But most probably, the seven angels that, the seven archangels that John refers to in the book of Revelation probably refer to these seven archangels. The Jews still believe that these are the seven archangels. So they believe in angels, but these are the leaders of the angels. These are the archangels. And it looks like one of these seven, the reference is to the reference to the seven angels is probably a reference to the seven archangels, and they each have a trumpet and they sound the trumpet. Okay. And I said, these trumpets announce a series of plagues or judgments that will fall upon the earth and its inhabitants. These seven angels stand before God. The phrase "to stand before God" means readiness for service. So when it says the seven angels were in the presence of God, it means they were ready for service. Okay, now let's go to verses 3 and 6. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. The smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of the saints, went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Okay. Now, there is a reference to another angel. This is not one of the 7 angels. It's another angel. His name, he's not identified. The Bible, John does not tell us the name of this angel, but he is another angel. When he says another angel, he is separating him from the other 7. Okay, this angel does not hold a trumpet in his hand. He doesn't blow a trumpet. He has a golden censer. And usually the priests, the Levites who served at the temple, had censers. Their censers were made of brass, not gold. And in the censer, they put coals and incense, and they sensed the holy place. Now, let me picture for you how the Jewish temple looked like. The Jewish temple in Jerusalem, the one built by Solomon, and the one that was built by Nehemiah, they have the same architectural plan. The temple consisted of 2 rooms. Just think of 2 rooms. All right? The first room was called the holy place, and next to it was the most holy place. What separated these 2 rooms was a curtain, a veil. Outside the temple, in front of the entrance, was the altar of sacrifice. It was made of brass. So when an Israelite sinned, he had to offer an animal as a sacrifice to be an atonement for his sin. That animal was slain by the priest, by one of the priests, and then most of it, or I say part of it, was burnt on the altar of sacrifice, which was made of brass, and it was not inside the temple. It stood near the entrance of the temple. Okay? Now you enter the temple, you go to the holy place. The holy place had 3 pieces of furniture. There was the table of showbread, where they had 12 loaves placed one over the other, and they were replaced every week by the priests. These 12 loaves represented the 12 tribes of Israel. Then there was the menorah, which is the lampstand with the 7 lamps. And then in front of the veil, the curtain, was the altar of incense. The altar of incense. That's where the priests ministered, in the holy place. The most holy place, nobody entered except the high priest, and only once a year during the Day of Atonement, which is known as Yom Kippur, when the Israelites fast the whole day and they confess their sins. And they believe that all the sins confessed on that day are forgiven by God. Okay, so the priests who served in the holy place, they took coals from the altar of sacrifice, which was outside the temple, near the entrance. So they took hot coals from the altar of sacrifice, placed them in their censer, and they sprinkled frankincense over the coals. That generated the smoke. They entered the holy place and sensed the holy place, and the smoke from the censers went up, and the smoke went over the veil, over the curtain, and filled up the most holy place. So the incense, the burning of incense, represented the prayers of the people ascending up to God. Okay? So here I recreated for you the scenery where it says, where we're told this another angel, took coals and then put them in the censer. The coals he must have taken from the altar of sacrifice, which is outside the holy place, near the entrance of the temple. and then they go in and cense the holy place. But the priests never entered the most holy place. Okay, so what happened with this? Another angel took his censer, filled it with fire, and threw it upon the earth. That's a symbol of judgment, meaning that judgments were to fall on this earth. We find a similar verse in Ezekiel chapter 10, verse 2. In Ezekiel chapter 10, verse 2, there we find an angel pouring the coals of his censer on the city of Jerusalem. That meant judgment was going to fall on the city of Jerusalem. So when the angel filled his censer with fire and threw it upon the earth, that symbolism meant that judgments, divine judgments, were about to fall on the inhabitants of the earth. Okay, so now we go to chapter 8, verse 7. Okay, let's go with 6 first. Then the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them. Now, verse 7, the first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down upon the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. So at the sounding of each trumpet, after the sounding of each trumpet, calamities begin to fall on this earth. So when the first angel sounded the first trumpet, what happened? Hail mixed with fire fell on the earth. It was mixed with blood, we're told. Well, the blood refers to the color. It means the hail and the fire. The blood describes the effect or the color of the hail and the fire. Hail mixed with fire gives a red color. So there was no blood mixed with the hail and fire. The blood denotes the color or the effect of the hail and fire. So this hail and fire, when they fall on the earth, they burn up, they hit the vegetation. They destroy the trees and the grass, and 1/3 of the vegetation is burned up. So it means that these trumpet judgments, these 7 trumpets denote 7 judgments, as we'll see. These trumpets are not final because they don't affect the whole world. They only affect a certain segment of the population. Like here we're told the judgment of the first trumpet, the hail and the fire, destroyed 1/3 of the vegetation of the planet. So we're dealing now with future events. This hasn't happened, but we see some similarities or some parallels with the 10 plagues that hit ancient Egypt. Would you please, I'm telling my wife to put on the screen the 10 plagues that hit Egypt. And I will show you that the first trumpet judgment is similar to the 7th plague that hit Egypt. If you look at the 10 plagues that hit ancient Egypt, the first one, the water of the Nile turned into blood. That we'll discuss later. Then the frogs, lice, flies. 7 is hail. similar to the first trumpet plague. So this is similar to the seventh plague that hit ancient Egypt. These trumpet plagues tell us that God is not a bystander. He's not a passive bystander. He brings this judgment on the impenitent inhabitants of this earth. So that's the first trumpet. It affects the vegetation, the trees and the grass. 1/3 of the vegetation of the plant will be destroyed when this plague hits our planet. Now we go to verses 8 and 9. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. 1/3 of the sea turned into blood, 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. So the first trumpet affected the vegetation. The second trumpet judgment or plague affects the sea, hits the sea. Now, I want you to notice that John doesn't say a mountain fell into a sea. He doesn't tell us a blazing mountain fell into the sea. He tells us something that looks like a mountain. Something that looks like a mountain fell into the sea. And as a result, 1/3 of the 1/3 of the creatures, that 1/3 of the fish, the animals that live in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships navigating the sea were destroyed. Okay. Now, some interpreters of the book of Revelation tell us that this happened on October 24, 79 AD, when Mount Vesuvius in Italy erupted and the city of Pompeii was destroyed. But this can't be, because there's still future. The trumpets are future. They're not in the past. But some Bible interpreters refer the second trumpet. They say the second trumpet happened when Mount Vesuvius erupted and destroyed the city of Pompeii on October 24, 79 AD. Well, Mount Vesuvius has exploded 3 dozen times since 79 AD. The last eruption of Mount Vesuvius was in 1944. It's still an active volcano. It hasn't erupted since 1944. Its last eruption was 1944. But as I said, these interpreters are wrong, because John doesn't tell us a blazing mountain fell into the sea. He tells us something that looked like a mountain fell into the sea. So what this could be, I believe it could be a meteor, a meteorite that will hit the sea and turn the water into blood and destroy some of the fish and the ships that sail across the sea. And this would be similar to when you go to the first Egyptian plague. The first plague that hit ancient Egypt hit the waters of the Nile River, and the waters of the Nile River were transformed into blood. So people could not use the Nile River water for irrigation. They could not use it for drinking. So this is similar to the first plague that hit ancient Egypt. But as I said, it's different because It wasn't caused by a volcanic eruption. This has no reference to the destruction of the city of Pompeii and the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. This is still future. It will happen. This will be an ecological disaster. So, some interpreters say that when it comes to the first trumpet, you remember the first trumpet destroyed 1/3 of the vegetation, the trees and the grass. They said that could possibly be caused by a nuclear war or a violent electrical storm, because it has hail mixed with fire. So the first trumpet could refer to a violent electrical storm or the fallout from a nuclear war. That's a possibility, because it's still in the future. It hasn't happened yet, but that's a distinct possibility. But when it comes to the second trumpet, the second trumpet affects the sea. The first one affects the vegetation. The second one affects the sea. By that I mean the oceans, not just one sea. It is a cataclysmic disaster. This one is a cataclysmic disaster, and I guess we're done with the second trumpet. Now let's go to the third trumpet, verses 10 and 11. The third angel sounded the trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. 1/3 of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. So the third trumpet brings a plague on the fresh waters, on the fresh water supply. A burning star falls from heaven. This could be an asteroid, a reference to an asteroid. A burning star falling from the sky could be an asteroid. And it hits the fresh waters, the springs, the fresh water supply, and makes it, the water becomes bitter. Wormwood is a bitter plant that grew up not only in the Middle East, it also grows in Africa and Asia and in South America. All right, so this is the opposite of what happened at Marah. You remember when the children of Israel left Egypt on their way to the promised land in the Sinai desert. They didn't have water. They came to a place where there was water, but the water was bitter. They could not drink it because it was bitter. And then Moses took a piece of wood, threw it into the water, and the water became sweet, and the people were able to drink it. So this is the reverse of what happened at Marah. At Marah, the bitter water became sweet. Here, the sweet water becomes bitter. It's just the reverse of that. Notice that the proportion of each ecological disaster remains the same. 1/3 of everything gets hurt, when each trumpet is sounded, 1/3 of the population is affected. So the proportion of each ecological disaster remains the same. This reminds me of Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 15. In Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 15 says, because Israel has forsaken God, he will feed them with wormwood and give them poisonous water to drink. That's Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 15. So Jeremiah says, because Israel has forsaken God, he will feed them with wormwood, bitter plant, and give them poisonous water to drink. So that's the third trumpet. Now let's go to the fourth, which is verses 12 and 13. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other three angels." Well, let's look at the fourth trumpet. What happens when the fourth trumpet is sounded? The sun, the moon, and the stars are affected. This is similar to the ninth plague that hits Egypt. You know, darkness enveloped the land of Egypt. That was the ninth plague. So this fourth trumpet is similar to the ninth Egyptian plague. What happens when the fourth trumpet is sounded? The planet darkens. Our planet becomes dark, or the light is reduced. The light of the sun and the moon and the stars is reduced. And this is similar to the sixth seal. You remember the sixth seal? When the sixth seal was opened, what happened? The sun was darkened, the moon turned red, and the stars fell from heaven. That's the sixth seal. So this is like the sixth seal. You notice I said Victorinos, who wrote the first comment on Revelation, said the seven seals, the seven trumpets, and the seven bowls are repetitive and sequential. So this is the fourth trumpet is very much like the sixth seal, but the trumpet's judgment is more severe. Thick darkness. You remember when Egypt was hit by the ninth plague, a thick darkness hit the land of Egypt, but there was light in the houses of the Israelites. So the plagues that hit ancient Egypt, the 10 plagues that hit ancient Egypt, affected the Egyptians, but they did not affect the Israelites. The Israelites were not hurt by the 10 plagues that hit Egypt. And here, the trumpets will affect the wicked, not the righteous. The righteous will not be hit by these ecological disasters. Joel chapter 2 verses 1 and 2 says, "The day of the Lord is coming. It's a day of darkness and gloom." The day of the Lord, that's the day of the Lord in the Old Testament is a day of judgment. So the day God will execute judgment on the wicked inhabitants of this earth is called a day of darkness. It will be a day of darkness. It will be a day of darkness indeed. So the four trumpets affect the natural world. There's something I want to tell you. The plagues that hit ancient Egypt happened prior to the deliverance of Israel from bondage. And the plagues of the trumpets will happen prior to the deliverance of the church, the new Israel, from the hostile powers that persecute them. So this is chapter 8, our study for today. If you have any questions, I will try to answer them. I'll do my best to answer your questions if you have any. This is your opportunity to ask questions.
Then, Pastor Terian, do you believe like we're gonna go through that, the judgment, the wrath of God, when the God is gonna throw all the wrath on the earth? Do you think, because there are pre-tribulationists, post-tribulationists, mid-tribulationists, people, they say before that happened, we're gonna be raptured. We're not gonna see all of this. We're not gonna see those. Those are gonna be on the sinners, on the people who don't believe in Jesus. We're gonna be raptured. But some people like you, you're gonna say we're gonna be in there, but we're gonna be protected like the Israelites were. They were protected by the when the 10 plagues came in Egypt.
You see, I place my beliefs based on the text of the Bible, not on someone's interpretation. By the way, the rapture, that the church will be raptured before the time of tribulation starts, was first taught in the 18th century. Before that, nobody taught it. And it's not taught, it's not in the Old Testament, it's not in the New Testament. The apostles did not teach it. The church fathers did not teach it. The Christian theologians who lived up to the 18th century did not teach it. And when this, the idea that God's people, the true Christians, will be raptured before the tribulation, the time of tribulation, was first taught by the Pentecostals in the 18th century, and then the majority of the Christians opposed them. But then the Assemblies of God started believing it. Some of the Baptists started believing it. And because when something is repeated over and over again, even though it's half true or untrue, people start believing it to be true. But it's not taught. You see, what I did with you today and during the previous Bible studies, I took the text I took the biblical text and interpreted it. Sometimes I interpret a text by referring to another text in the Bible, or to some other religious books that were used by the Jews at the time of Christ, like the names of the 7 archangels. But I based my interpretation on the original text, the original Greek text of the Bible. And that's why I chose to do my master's in biblical languages. So I go by the Greek text of the Bible. And in this text, it doesn't say that God's people will be taken. By the way, the tribulation is another subject. Will the church go through the tribulation, or will the church be raptured before the tribulation? That's a long Bible study that we can devote to it sometime later on. And again, the premillennialists, the postmillennialists, that's also another Bible study. So, in other words, let's not bring in new subjects. Let's just take the biblical text of Revelation chapter 8, the chapter we studied today, and see if you have questions relating to it. Okay? We will study those things later on. After we finish Revelation, we will study about the tribulation. Will the church go through the time of tribulation, or will the church be raptured before that? But one thing is true, that these disasters, these divine judgments, will not affect the righteous, will not affect God's people. They'll affect the impenitent sinners. Like the plagues that hit ancient Egypt did not have any adverse effect on the Israelites. They affected the Egyptians, not the Israelites. God's people were saved. Like Exodus tells us, there was a thick darkness over all the land, covering all the land of Egypt, but there was light in the homes of the Israelites. So God protected his people amid those judgments. And I believe the same thing will happen in the time of the end, that God will protect his people. these judgments represent the wrath of God, and the wrath of God will be poured out on the impenitent sinners, not on the righteous.
Is there a mention of lives lost, or is it just things that are happening?
Well, of course, some people will die when these judgments fall, but we're told 1/3. In the trumpet plagues, 1/3 of the people will be affected. When we studied the seals, it said, no, the seal said 1/4, this one 1/3. So, in other words, these will be partial. As Victorine said, they are sequential and repetitive. So the seals happen, the seals plagues hit before the trumpet plagues. The seals, the plagues of the seals will affect 1/4 of the population. The plagues of the trumpet will affect another 1/3 of the population. So not all the people will die. Part of the people will die. These plagues are not final, I said, they're partial. 1/3, 1/4, these are partial. Any other questions?
Bob Millie, I'm noticed as I'm looking at the passage that it says a third were destroyed, but we're talking about, let's see, the first was vegetation, sea, fresh water,
Yes.
and then light.
Light. Yeah.
And so there weren't specific, I mean, there weren't people that were dealt with at this. This was basically, I guess the thing that I was also thinking about was, as I'm going through the 4 trumpets, you were using the plagues in Egypt. I had on my second screen Genesis 1 up, because I was looking at the order of creation and seeing if the destruction was following the same order. And I didn't know whether there was a difference in Hebrew and Greek versus, because there are some that are not in the right order. If I was to compare Genesis 1 against Revelation 8. Because the way that I sort of look at Revelation is God is destroying the new and the old and creating a new earth, if you will.
Yeah, but this doesn't deal with that because in Genesis chapter 1, the first thing God created was light.
Right.
Light is affected by the
well, right. But when I'm talking, when I look at that first light, I actually look at the concept of God, not God himself, but because God had to create something. But in essence, the firmament that would eventually become heaven.
Well, the book of Revelation says this sky will be rolled up.
Right.
New heaven created, new earth and new heaven.
Right.
The present heaven will be rolled up, will disappear, it will be replaced.
Will disappear, and a new heaven and a new earth are created. Exactly. And so the thought was, as you were going through it, that's why I pulled up Genesis 1 on my other screen so I could look at the order and see whether it's synced up.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I mean, it's an intriguing idea, but it doesn't follow.
No, it doesn't. You're right.
It doesn't follow the same order. But I'm glad, I mean, you thought of it.
Yeah.
You thought of it and did a comparison. It's an intriguing idea, but the it doesn't follow the same order.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Badri, I have a question. I'm trying to just wrap my head around this whole thing. And that with the 7 seals, 1/4 was destroyed, correct?
Yeah.
And then with the trumpets, 1/3 was destroyed. So that is like 58% of the earth. It leaves us with 42%. So is the remaining 42 going to be destroyed with, I guess, the bowls? And then if that's all destroyed with afterwards, then when does the tribulation start? Because this is just judgment time or pre-tribulation. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around this whole thing.
We haven't studied yet the remaining 3 trumpets. More
Okay.
will die, and then when we study the bowls, more will die. Because once we finish the bowls, then that's the end of the judgments.
Okay.
We have 3 series of judgments: the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls.
Right.
So we end up with the 7 bowls, then we'll find out what percentage of the people, of the inhabitants of the earth, will perish.
So the remaining 42 at this point will not have perished with the 7 bowls then. All right, we'll wait and see. Okay.
See, yeah. We'll wait and see. But I mean, that's the principle I follow. I follow the text of the Bible, and wherever it leads me. I don't come to the Bible with preconceived ideas like some people do. Some people form a theory or build up a theological argument, then they go to the Bible searching for evidence to support their view. That's not the way I do. I take the Bible, the text of the Bible, and follow it wherever it leads me. So I don't approach the Bible with any preconceived ideas. I approach it with the attitude of a learner. I don't presume to know everything. I'm still learning. I'm still studying, like all of you. With each day, my knowledge, of course, is expanding. It's increasing because I keep finding new things.
Mhm.
But I believe that's the safest way to do. Just follow the text of the Bible and see what the text tells you. Sometimes I read a verse several times in order to get the gist of it. What is it telling me? What is in this verse? Is there something that I overlooked? Sometimes I find new things in a verse that I had preached on several times, that I had read several times, but I had missed something, which I find later on. So it happens from time to time.
I wonder if 1/4 is symbolic, because 4 times 1/4 will be the whole earth, the whole world, 1/4, and next time is 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. 4 times 1/4 will be everything. You see what I'm saying? I think that's what Susie was also getting number-wise. If you are saying 1/4 of a whole thing, another 1/4 of the remaining 1/4.
Well, if you notice my interpretation, I didn't take the number literally. I said 1/4, 1/3 means it's a partial. The effect will be partial, not total.
Not exactly.
Because 1/4 and 1/3 makes like 58%. So, okay.
I don't think you can look at this from an accounting perspective. You know?
Well, I'm an accountant, so that's how my brain.
Yeah, I know. Well, me too. But I just throw my books away and I say that's it.
Things have to add up.
Yeah.
I mean, Susie may be right. I mean, what percentage of the population of the earth, if Christ were to come today, what population would be ready for translation, percentage-wise? I believe maybe, I don't know, maybe 20% of all Christians are ready for translation. The others are just nominal Christians who are not following the teachings of Jesus Christ, or not living in harmony with the teachings of the gospel. So the Bible tells us those who do God's will endure forever. So it's very important to know what God's will is and then to do it. Our will should be identical with God's will. God's will and our will should be the same. And then we'll be ready for any eventuality.
But bad value, we want our mind to be like Jesus' mind. That's the difficult part. The will, okay, the mind and the emotion, the whole soul has to be like Jesus' soul. The mind is like, for me, I don't understand it. He did the flood. He should have killed Noah also. Everything. He created it. He destroyed it. Now he's allowing 8 people. Now they are too many people. Now he's killed. Why is not killing the men instead of killing the vegetation? What the vegetation did to God? It's his creation. He's poisoning everything so that the human beings are there by then, they will be poisoned. If the water is bitter, if everything, we're going to be hungry. We're going to die. I don't know why he's doing that. Instead of directly killing the sinner, he's destroying all the vegetation, all the water bitterness. I don't understand it.
I believe that God is giving people an opportunity to repent. You see, the Bible tells us God does not wish to destroy sinners. He wants them to repent.
But we know at the end, little people might know, very little people, they're going to be with Jesus. They're all going to be destroyed. At the end, people are not going to even believe in Jesus. They're going to believe in lies, in whatever the Antichrist is doing, the miracles. Little people are going to be believing in Jesus. They're going to be with him.
We studied the Bible, so we won't be deceived. We won't be deceived by the false miracle workers.
People are going to be deceived.
So if you are well informed, you are forewarned. To be forewarned is to be prepared. And that's why Bible study is essential. It's important to study and see what's in it and what to expect in the future.
I know our mind, we don't understand. Our mind is not, we don't understand.
Now, RP, we are finite creatures.
Yeah, that's the thing.
The infinite God. And we cannot tell God why he is doing certain things. We cannot advise God what to do, what not to do. That's the gist of that's the message of the book of Job.
I know, but he gave us mind, he gave us...
That he should not question God.
But why did he give us a mind? He should have made us a robot. We believe in him, we don't have to question him. We're like a robot. He gives us glorified bodies. We don't have to sin, no devil, no nothing. But he keeps the devil, and we are in as finite people. He gives us emotion, will, and...
RP, listen. If God created us like robots without the ability to think and decide and make choices, we would not be able to love God. Because love is never coerced. You can't force someone to love another. Love is not coerced. So if God created us like robots without the freedom of choosing and making decisions, we would not be able to love God. We would not be able to love. Love is not coerced.
I'm not saying robot.
God wants us to love him, not out of fear, but out of love. God wants us to obey him out of love, not out of fear.
But I'm not talking to make us robot. I wanted to make us like glorified bodies. How are we gonna be with him? We don't have a choice. We're always gonna worship him when we're with him with glorified bodies. We are not gonna change our minds. We always gonna worship him day and night until eternity. God knows how. How are we gonna do that? Because we have glorified bodies. I want that glorified body. That's what I'm talking about, not the...
We'll have the glorified body at the time of Christ's second coming or at the time of death. We'll have that glorified body.
I know.
When you have the glorified body is the immortal body.
Yeah.
You will have a new nature. You will have a new nature, and the new nature will have different cravings. Now, our physical nature craves certain things, but we have a glorified body, our cravings will be different from what they are now.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, I remember when I was a student at the seminary, where I had a classmate who was from Kenya, Africa.
Mhm.
Whenever we went to the cafeteria to eat our meals, whenever they gave us an apple, he gave his apple to me. He never ate apples because in Kenya there are no apples. He had never eaten apples, he had never tasted them, and when he tried to eat one, he didn't like it. So he always gave me his apple. Uh, he didn't crave apples because he had no taste for it. And when we have glorified bodies, we will not be craving the things that we are craving now. We'll have a different nature. We'll,
Yes.
it would be a completely different existence. God says everything will become new.
Yes.
Everything old will be gone away, will be swept away. The old is gone, everything will be made new. So there'll be new heavens, there will be a new earth, we'll have new bodies, we'll have new minds, we'll have new lives and new nature, completely different from our present nature. Even animals will have a different nature because we're told the lion and the lamb will live together and the lion will not harm, the lion will not devour the lamb in God's new earth. So even the nature of animals will change.
The Calvinists say the lions are non-believers and the lambs are the believers. That's why we're living with the lamb with the lion, you know, we're living with the sinners and evil people, and we're the lamb and they are the lions. That's what they interpret. We're in 1,000 years of.
To call your attention to verse 13, Revelation 8, verse 13.
Yeah.
I heard an eagle that was flying in midair and saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." The Greek text doesn't say eagle, it says an angel. I heard an angel that was flying. An eagle doesn't say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." But so this was an angel, not an eagle. So the Greek text says an angel. I watched and I heard an angel that was flying in midair and call out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other three angels." So next week, we'll study the remaining three trumpets. All right?
Okay.
By the way, just a comment for RP. She was saying that some people say that the lions and the lamb represent the believers and unbelievers, and it's right now.
Yeah.
However, in the image you presented, Badbeli, with the new our changes, the lion and the lamb will be laying together in peace and harmony. Right now, the sinners and the believers are not laying together in harmony.
Good
I don't know if I would accept that symbolism.
Good point.
We're living together.
People ask me, whose theology do you follow? Luther's, Calvin's?
Yeah.
I tell them I don't follow the theology of anyone. I don't believe in those labels. I follow the Bible. And I've been blessed because of the study of biblical languages. It has a great deal. I can find any mistranslation and correct it. If you go by the original text, you can never go wrong. So if you follow the Bible, you can never go wrong. Now, I respect Luther and Spurgeon and Calvin, all these people. They wrote many good things, but they were not infallible. They made mistakes. Not all their writings are on par with the Bible. The Bible is infallible. Everything else is fallible. Calvin did not claim infallibility, nor Luther, nor Spurgeon, nor any of the spiritual giants of the past. We learned many good things from from our predecessors, from Calvin, from Luther, from other reformers, from John Knox. But we don't have to follow these men all the way because, as I said, they're fallible. They made mistakes, and their writings contain some errors. They wrote what they knew was truth at the time, but just follow the Bible. That's my advice. You will never be misled.
I have a question. I have a different kind of question. Are you going to explain, are all the archangels warriors?
What was your question? I didn't get the last sentence.
Are all the archangels warriors?
Warrior.
Warriors? Well, I don't know. I don't know. But you can tell them, I mean, we're told in the epistle to the Hebrews, God, the angels are ministering spirits, and they are messengers. They carry God's messengers. They do whatever God commands them to do. So, and interestingly enough, the angels in the Bible are referred to as the heavenly hosts. And you know, when it says heavenly hosts means heavenly armies. So in a sense, you can say all the angels are warriors. They're the army of God. They're God's army. The fact they're called the hosts of heaven, the original Hebrew and Greek both refer to armies. So the angels are the armies of God. So in that sense, yes, RP, you're right. All the angels are warriors. Oh, Joanne, you're right.
But Veli, when it's eagle, it's angel. Which translation is angel? Where do we go? We want the right translation, not we hear over here eagle, but it's angel. Which translation is angel instead of the eagle? Is there a translation, the correct translation?
Yeah, you see, I go by the original text, not by the translations, but I believe that the most reliable English version, there is no English Bible that is error-free when it comes to translation. All of them have mistakes.
Okay.
King James has the most mistakes. I've identified 8,500 mistakes in translation in the King James version. But the English Bible that has the least translational mistakes is the New American Standard Bible.
New American. NIV. New American. No, New Internet and New American.
New International Version. The NIV has mistakes, as I pointed one today in Revelation chapter 8, verse 13. The Bible I'm using is the NIV here, but the New American Standard Bible, I have it. Most people don't buy it because, first of all, it's not advertised as widely as the NIV and as the King James Version. Anyway, there are some Christians evangelical Christians who believe that the only true Bible is the King James Version, and they reject all other versions.
Yeah.
I tell them, I love to read the King James Version. I love its language. It's very poetic, very expressive. It's a beautiful, flowing language, good English. But it has the most translational mistakes because it was produced in 1611. And at that time, the people who translated the Bible didn't know as much Greek and Hebrew as now. So modern translators can do a better job. The New American Standard Bible, it's known as the NASB, New American Standard Bible, has the least translational errors. It follows the Hebrew and the Greek text very closely. I'm not saying it's error-free, but has the least errors. But as I said, I don't follow a single Bible. I just go by the Greek text. When it comes to New Testament, I go by the Greek text. When it comes to Old Testament, I go by the Hebrew text.
But we have to learn Greek to go to the Greek test, isn't it? We have to know Greek to go to the Greek test. How we go to the Greek test? You have to know Greek, isn't it?
Yeah, we have to know somebody who has studied biblical languages, and they'll be able to tell you. And by the way, there is now the internet.
Yeah.
If you go to the internet
Okay.
and say
Greek.
Revelation 8:13,
Mhm.
instead of eagle, does the Greek text say angel?
Oh.
To find an answer.
Oh, that's a good thing in Greek. Okay. Thank you so much for telling us.
So the internet has made things easier for Bible researchers.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. In Greek. Okay. In the internet. Thank you, Badveli.
Okay. Any other question?
Hmm.
If not, God bless you. And
Thank you.
next week.
Thank you, Badweli. Good night for
Good
everyone.
Thank you, Badveli.
Thank